Welcome to Messy Parenting, a Catholic conversation on marriage and family. I'm Mike Hernon.
I'm Alicia Hernon.
And as we have shared before, we are not experts. We're simply parents of 10 children who've been married 23 years, give or take. And
22 and a half.
22 and a half, almost. And we are just trying to share some insights from the ups and downs. We are far from perfect, and we are far from experts.
And at this moment, we are recording on a Saturday morning, and I think it'll be a miracle if we get through this without someone interrupting us.
Amen.
So, because I can hear little kids yelling downstairs.
Hey, but that's life, right?
So we will see. And actually, it's good because we hear the
siblings at work.
Siblings at work, and that's what this podcast is about.
That's right. That's right. So before we do that, let's just go for a prayer.
Why don't you go ahead and pray?
Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, we invite you into our time right now. We ask you to be with us. The greatest heart and desire of a parent is for their children, that they would be not only safe, but get along with each other. Lord, we pray for our kids. We pray for all of the children of the families listening. Lord, that you would be in their relationships and their hearts and minds and draw them together. In your name we pray. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy.
I don't think you guys can hear this on the podcast, but I hear yelling and banging downstairs.
Yeah. So there's always classic stories, whether it be in movies, whether it be a Bill Cosby stand-up. Yeah, I should mention Bill Cosby these days, but stop touching me, or that's mine, and so.
Well, I was thinking, why is it so important that your kids get along? Because I think especially when you're first raising your family, a lot of your focus can be on, your relationship with your kids,
right.
Getting them to be obedient.
It's about you as a parent.
Exactly. Which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But
That's
I'm
right.
just saying, getting them to be obedient, doing chores, cleaning the room, forming them as a person.
That's right.
But a really important part of your family, in a way, has nothing to do with you. It's your siblings, your children, their relationship with each other.
Right.
Because the reality is that most of us are 20 or 30 or sometimes 40 years older than our kids.
Right.
And there's going to be a majority of their life when they're not living with you.
That's right.
And you are going to, hopefully we all die before our children do, and they are going to have each other. So your family includes a lot more relationships than just your marriage, which is obviously the foundation, or your relationship with your kids. There's also their relationships with each other.
Yeah.
And that is very, very important. Okay,
I want to go back to a point that you just made about kind of like the relationships in our family. It's obviously the first and foundational is our marriage, and then we have how we relate with our kids. But really what we're talking about is how our kids relate with each other.
Exactly.
And I really think that as you look at kind of the grand scheme of things, it goes lesser and lesser control. Meaning we can control a lot more in our relationship with each other, how we give our love to our spouses. We can control a lot more of how we direct and relate to our children. Mm-hmm. And those are huge and those are important. But it's actually a little bit more challenging and a little bit more out of our control when you think about our kids.
That's true.
And I think that gives parents, again, we just did a podcast on worry. I think people sometimes can get anxious about that. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about why that's so important, is that for our kids, that will, as you said, be the longest relationships that they have.
Right.
But it also forces them to deal with people in a whole new way.
Right.
And there are so many benefits that come from this. And really, in the grand scheme of things, this is what church is. The church is a model of the family. Mm-hmm. Because, God set up man and woman, and for man and woman to be fruitful. And that is the model for the church. That's how Christ loves the church. So when you think about your kids and how they relate to one another, that is so important of how they're going to relate to their friends, to others in the workplace and the world. And this really sets them up in a huge way. So we may not be able to control it as much, but like a lot of things, we can create the environment, we can create the situations where they can flourish and be fruitful in those relationships.
And I think that because the key to having your kids have good relationships with each other is for you to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's, like you just said, that is really hard.
That's right.
Because I think parents, a lot of times, you just have to remove yourself from the situation and then just leave them there. And you might think, oh my gosh, they would kill each other if I wasn't there. You know what? that is not necessarily true. You don't really know that
until you
don't know
try it
that
out, and then
until you try it, and then
maybe we're wrong. Okay.
then maybe you should step in. But a lot of times, I think if you set that good foundation and a good example through your relationship with your husband, and and how you relate with them, and how you teach them to relate with each other, then when they get to be teenagers and you are going to go out to dinner with your spouse and you leave the oldest ones in charge, or you go away for a weekend, which we've done, and leave your, college age kids in charge, or your older, senior teenagers, then that is when interesting things happen.
That's right. That's right. We're getting ahead of ourselves though a little bit, because I think that's the, going into the tactics of this, of how do we live out those relationships? How do we make those relationships flourish? But it really is it is super important. And again, I think even if it's not entirely in your control, it is so important to invest some time talking through with your spouse. How are we going to create an environment for our kids? Because the theme or the title of this podcast is, yes, your kids can be best friends.
And let me just tell you, and like we said at the beginning of the podcast, I mean, we're not experts or anything, but all we can share is our experience. And
That's right.
I do know of people who grew up, I'm the second of 10 children, and I know people who grew up in a big family who do not have good relationships with their
Right. It's not a given,
brothers and sisters.
Right?
It's not a given. And I think that that's very important for especially Catholic parents to realize, is that it's not, hey, you just can't bring your kids to Mass every week and say the rosary and just be like, oh, they're all going to be fine. And that's not necessarily true. I think you need to be a little bit more proactive than that.
You have to be intentional.
Teaching. You have to be intentional about teaching about those relationships. But my experience was very good, and I
growing up,
now,
you guys didn't fight at all, right?
Growing up, all we did was fight with each other. But the end result was very good, meaning that honestly, my closest relationships right now are with my brothers and sisters. And they're outside of my friends here in town, of which I'm blessed to have many good friends. The relationships that I keep up with for people who don't live here are mostly my brothers and sisters, really.
And you have enough of them. That keeps you busy.
It keeps me very busy. We would go on vacation. I mean, that's who we go on vacation with. Even Mike, when we go, when we have time to spend at Christmas and usually once during the summer, we make it a point to see his family because he has good relationships with his brothers and sisters that are really, really important. And I always feel like it's this net, like a net of love, that I have to support me, but that also now my children have that. Like if God forbid anything happened to Mike and I know my children will be cared for by my siblings because I have developed those relationships with them. And it is such a comfort to me on many, many levels to have deep relationships with my siblings. And I want to give them, more than anything, I want to give that to my children. When people meet me and they say, oh, you have, a big family. Oh my gosh, you have all these kids or whatever. And usually my first response is, I am blessed by my relationships with my brothers and sisters, and I want to give that to my kids.
That's right.
I feel like that is the greatest gift that I can give them, is each other, not just their lives, but also in being intentional about fostering good relationships between them and teaching them how to relate to each other so they can have good friendships.
And just to be a slight tangent, but the idea that I think God created us for community. Kind of started saying that before.
You think that?
Maybe, just maybe, right? And but I think we gloss over that too much. That it's it is not a Catholic understanding to believe that it's our relationship with God alone that matters. Yes, you need to have a personal relationship with Christ. You need to have a personal relationship with the Almighty. But it's in community, and He created us for community. And there was just this show about or a news episode about soldiers coming back with PTSD, and how those who are coming into strong, tight knit communities, typically actually in other countries,
like in Israel, where everyone serves in the military,
right? And so they have a common experience that they come back to, but they also have tight family units and things of that nature. And I think about, our kids and how we may have not been raised that way. Alicia and I have been raised with strong relationships with our siblings. And so the whole world might be against us, but we know we've got our family and we've got, our siblings, our extended family. And they found that in the study that a nuclear family is simply not sufficient for those soldiers coming back with PTSD. It's good, it's helpful, it's essential,
But it's
but
not
not
enough.
enough. And so you may have not grown up in a family where you were particularly close to your siblings. I want to invite you to say, I want something better for my kids, and I believe that God wants that for our world, where there is a deep sense of not just your own individual family, but that you're creating a whole new line of extended family members. So I think about the cousins that our kids have that they're in close relationship
In the
with.
second generation of Domans, right now there's 45 cousins and counting.
And that's what's going to make society flourish. I mean, I don't want to get too crazy on us, but I mean, that's what God's plan is that we can't control all of society. We can control our family. Mm-hmm. And I believe the more that we teach our children and teach them in such a way that they not only love each other and work through issues with each other, they'll pass that on to generations and generations to come.
So it's not just for today, people. This is for, I mean, you really have to look ahead and being like, this is for the generations to come.
And so if you're in your 20s and 30s and even 40s, you may not be thinking about grandkids and other things like that. And maybe you don't need to worry about that just yet or get excited about that. But the reality is that, we are called to parent through the generations. And so that we can have the greatest impact in our children's lives, who then can impact their kids and society as a whole. So anyway, just as a big picture, remember, this is important. What we're doing is more value than anything you can ever do at your job. Like if you fix your company and it's really working great, you should be doing that. That's wonderful, and use your gifts and talents. But there's nothing more valuable, more lasting, more important, and more of a legacy than the way that you influence your children so that they can go out and really influence the world and all their children and their relations.
And, I will use my parents here as an example because, like I said, like growing up, we just were constantly, fighting and all that stuff. And I felt like my parents were very backwards because we did things like go on family retreats, and we had family nights where we had no friends able to come over, and they would do all of these things with us.
How draconian!
That I felt very cramped in my social, my social life. But and I all felt like we were weird. We were the weird ones. I didn't know anybody who had as many kids as we had, anywhere close to as many kids we had, and but now looking back. All right, now I'm in my 40s, and I realize, my parents did this beautiful, incredible thing. It's really powerful. So exactly what Mike is talking about, they invested that time in us. So now they have 10 children who love each other, who share values. I mean, I tell people I would trust any of my siblings to raise my children. I really would.
Because they love Jesus and they love people.
That's right. And did I feel like that when I was little? No. But they have passed on that value. And now I see my brothers and sisters raising their own children with those values. And the next generation, oh my goodness, like my cousin, all of these cousins, they're all going to grow up and have kids. I mean, it's like really changing the world.
It is.
So have hope, because my childhood doesn't feel that far away, but now here and I know my parents say all the time, it's like a blink of an eye, that they went from having everybody at home to now everyone is scattered throughout the United States, doing all these things. But, 40 years, it's really not that long of a time.
It is a blink of an eye.
And so what you're doing now with your kids is really, really important in laying that foundation.
And I remember, and this is just totally mundane, but I remember in a business class in college, actually I was getting my MBA, and just really fully realizing the power of compounded interest, of just what happens, and really I was like, wow, I can be a millionaire if I do this, this, and this. That's only this little investment.
We're not millionaires, so
we are not, but realizing that in parenting, it's got even a huger.
That's not a word.
Okay, it's a word now. A huger effect, the multiplier, if you will, effect of your parenting.
Right.
And it's just exciting. And again, we just have Alicia's parents over, and they had 10 children. We have 10 children. And, one's a priest and one's that. It's like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
God is doing amazing things. So I think hopefully we've given you an idea that it's important.
We want to
that
inspire
your kids,
you.
Yeah, hopefully you're encouraged to say, yeah, how are we being more intentional about this with getting our kids to become best friends? It's important and it's possible.
Yes.
Okay? It's possible.
That's what we want to tell you, is that
That's
it's
right.
possible, even though it doesn't feel like it right now. So we want
All
to
right.
talk about we did a little bit reflection of our own childhood, and then also things that we've done with our kids, because I mean right now we have 5 teenagers, 3 in college or going off to college. So I have to say that when we hang out with our kids, especially the oldest 5, we just have so much fun together. I mean,
It is hysterical.
we went out. My daughter, my third daughter, graduated from high school on Wednesday, and
We are not that old, but
and we went out to dinner with the older children, and it was just such a great time. It was just a great time to be with them. And so anyway, so we kind of are seeing some of the fruits of that now.
right. But it took. I don't think. I mean, you more so probably had that in your mind, and you could see what you lived through. And I think I have very good relationships with my brothers and sisters.
But you were on the lower end of your family, so it was a different experience.
And so I had one sibling younger than me by 2 years, and that Anyway, so but just seeing the investments we made early in their relationships, and plenty of mistakes. I mean, plenty of screw ups, but those investments really did pay off. And I'm just seeing it. I mean, I love our kids. I just love being with them, and sometimes it's a struggle, but there were some very intentional things that we did that really brought this about.
Right. Okay, so the first foundational thing is just have as many kids as possible.
Yes.
I'm not kidding. Have as many children as you can possibly have. And I say that, if God gives you 2 kids, great. That's what he wants you to work with. He gives you 4 kids, that's what he wants you to work with. But just be open. I'm telling you, if my parents had 3 kids and stopped, my sister Regina, then myself and my brother Martin, I think I would have thought I was adopted, because Regina and Martin are so incredibly creative, and way more creative than I am. And I think I would have been like, I am a misfit. There's something wrong with me.
There's something
wrong. But God wanted
right.
my parents to have more children. And so they had 7 other kids after that. And so we have this whole network of relationships that this is the stuff that God wanted my parents to work with. Not everybody obviously is blessed to have, but whatever amount of kids God gives you, that is your raw material, if you will.
Right.
So be open to that, because it's a beautiful thing to have lots of different personalities.
So embrace God's gift of life. Embrace openness to life, and see what God will do with it.
That's right.
Because your kids are going to need many different personalities, unique gifts and talents that are going to challenge and love them and embrace them. And because the God's plan is that you and your spouse are going to help shape these children, but also a very powerful force will be their siblings.
Yes.
And so the greatest gift you can give your child is another brother or sister.
Absolutely. And I wish I had time to just describe the range of personalities within my brothers and sisters, which are actually greater than, I think our own children are kind of more similar, but my family of origin, my brothers and sisters we have artists, we have engineers, we have very structured personalities, very free-flowing personalities. We have a lot of extremes.
That's right.
And it has been a gift for me to relate with them and love them and see the giftedness in people who are very different from myself.
Right.
So how do you do this?
Yeah. So the first suggestion we have.
Some of these are from my parents. I should say.
Well, of course. So we get all the we steal. There's an acronym: CASE, copy and steal everything. So that's what parenting is all about. Look at others. And so first is making them work together. And I remember this, the movie Miracle, the hockey, where he got them so angry that they were all mad at the coach. And so they united together as a team against the coach.
This is easy to do when you're a parent.
Yeah. And so, whatever it takes, right? But first, we all need work to do. So it's good for many levels. We did a whole podcast, I think, on work and
chores.
The importance of chores and so forth, right? But getting them to work together in teams really creates a whole new opportunity for them. Again, it's all about iron sharpening iron, or kids kind of taking off the rough edges of each other, but giving them a task together.
Like when I say, clean the basement. There's like
Oh my gosh,
cries
meltdown.
of, whatever. But I just did that yesterday and had
The wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Exactly. Sent down a group of kids down to the basement to clean it up because we have a graduation party tomorrow. But I think that that's a good, even if they're honestly, and you may say, oh my gosh, if I did that to my kids, they'd be fighting the whole time. Guess what? My kids were fighting the whole time too. But you know what? They did it anyway.
That's right.
And it's worth it because they need to work it out. And because there are going to be times when they are out in the world and they're going to be working with people that they don't like. We all have had to work with people we don't like. And you know what? You just do it because you got to get the job done. And the more that they do it, the more they learn, okay, well, look, this person does this person does this, and they work it out and they realize how they can work as a team.
And again, there is value in getting the job done and getting the job done well, but it's also, at least for the point of this topic, is that they're working together.
Right.
And that, although we do want a good product at the end, a clean basement, it's also very heavily about them just being together, working together, and there are going to be fighting. They are going to argue. They are going to disagree, and one's going to do more, and one's going to do less, and they're going to feel
there's
like,
always like the hard worker and then the guy who's just lazy. I mean, it just happens.
Right, but together again, they help each other, and they it's like you learn patience in dealing with a sibling, and you do it just because you're going to get frustrated.
Right.
The more you put them together, they're going to get frustrated. You know what? They're going to figure it out.
Right.
You're going to force them into situations where their motivation to figure out the other person is going to go up and up and up, which is going to just challenge
because they
them.
want to get the stupid job done so they can get out of
That's
here.
right. and that's okay. But they're going to work together. It teaches a lot of other skills in that, but really it's about pulling them together and forcing them to in that dynamic.
And I think that it's very good too to have older and younger kids work together.
Yes.
So because that is a very good dynamic as well, and so they can form those relationships. I mean, I am 14 years apart, 11 years apart from some of my siblings, and we're very close. We're very close now, and I remember doing stuff with them, when I was little, even though I only really lived at home with them for maybe 5 years. Some of them, for my little sister Anna, I only lived at home with her for about 2 years. But even that distance, like I remember having to do chores and doing stuff with them, and that's good to make them do those things. And one of the punishments my mom used to do, she said that when she saw two kids always fighting together, she would make them work together.
Yes.
Just kind of like make them work it out. Go out and weed the garden or whatever. That was their punishment.
Because you can't, again, you have to be very intentional and say, I'm not going to let this kid, like let's say they're always fighting together. Say, I'm just going to let that continue.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. Now, I don't have to come in and solve all their problems. That's not good either. But I'm going to put them in proximity. I'm going to put them together with a purpose, with, hey, you've got an objective to accomplish together.
Right.
Figure it out.
Right.
You're building teamwork. You're building them to work together and become, build the foundations for them becoming best friends.
I think that when you give them the skills, when you give them the tools, you just have to let them practice that.
That's right.
You can't make them get along, but what you can do is give them the tools, give them the environment, and say,
have at it.
Exactly.
Enjoy.
So then on the other side, you can also make them play together. I feel like
you must have fun. Mandatory fun,
I think that the fun that you have as a family greases the gears of the engine of the family. So it can't all be work and chores, even though I say this all the time, I feel like my whole childhood was chores and fighting, but that's not really true. But obviously there are times that we played together, and we do that with our kids too. And you have to have that family night with no friends. Even though your kid, they're all going to complain, and the teenagers will hate it, and they'll be like, "Oh, we got blah blah." You just got to do it.
I never go out. I never see my friends.
Exactly. What I mean? Of course, you don't want to do it the same night as a big party or something like that. But you do have to have a time where you're like, you know what? This is family night. This is family time where we're going to be together, and then just make them stay in. And even if you put the little kids to bed and you have some time to just play board games with the older kids, or everybody goes outside and you play tag or capture the flag, or we played a lot of baseball growing up, or football or whatever. Just have everybody doing something together. And I think that having no friends around, even though incorporating friends sometimes is fun, but I really think it's important. And I don't think enough parents, especially when they have teenagers who are trying to pull away, I don't think enough parents put their foot down and say, like Mike just said, you will stay in and you will have fun.
That's
with
right.
us.
I mean, come on, because it is so important, and I know again we're seeing the fruits of this right now. When we went out the other night with our oldest kids, the conversations we had that you can have if you're just watching a movie together. Again, I'm a fan of movies. I like watching movies with my kids, but the game nights, the interaction times, the playing. Dodgeball in the yard, or spud, or basketball, or whatever it might be. Just
whatever your family's thing is,
right? Whatever the game, the activity, the fun, the going out bowling. Whatever it might be. I think we've done podcasts on that too. But it is so important. So for them to work together, for them to play together, and to pray together. As a family, we're on the wagon and off the wagon, and how consistent we are as family.
Well,
prayer.
don't get to prayer yet. Wait a second. I want to say something else about the playing
I'm
together.
Sorry. All right.
Is that another thing as far as playing together is when you leave and you have them stay home.
Oh,
and
yes.
so then
they
can do stuff together and they can play together, and you leave and you say, guys, I want you to play a game together and you can watch a movie later. Or you can always take all the remotes with you when you leave to make sure that they don't just turn around and watch TV.
And electronic devices sometimes,
exactly.
smartphones.
But I think
computers.
that when they are left to their own to play together, that's when the real dynamics happens.
That's right.
Because when mom and dad are there, you're kind of like naturally going to take the lead and they expect you to. But when you're not there,
I remember,
really
and this has happened a couple times, and I think they did it intentionally. But as we walk out of the house, we hear them go, "Yay!" cheering in the background, And you want that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is not about you.
Exactly.
This is about them
exactly.
and about their life and their love, and is their love tank full?
Right.
So we can't be beholden to their love. I mean, like that. Oh, they will fall apart if we're not there. The whole point is that we're setting them up so that they can be good. Now, again, you don't leave your 3-year-old alone.
You kind of want them to fall apart, and so that they can build each other back up.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's not.
But
that's not the
but
end of the world.
ultimately, our hope would be is that we will always have an irreplaceable role in the lives of our children.
Of course.
Period. But the reality is that we want to have them to a place where they are able to, as a small knit community of siblings, be able to encourage and support and challenge and grow and develop on their own too. I mean, there's something very beautiful about that.
They can support each other in a way you simply can't.
That's
My
right.
teenage daughters support each other in a way that I simply can't support them because
That's
I'm their
right.
mother. I have a different role, an irreplaceable role, as Mike was saying, as their mother. But they need each other as sisters. My son Patrick has a very specific role in the
That's
life
right.
of his younger sisters, a role that Mike cannot fulfill because
That's
he's their dad, and it's different and beautiful. But an older brother is different, and they need to have those kind of relationships, and that is really only going to happen when you're not around.
That's right. Yeah. So we create the environment, and then it's not like we just let it become Lord of the Flies, and
But you have to take that risk that it will happen like that, and just kind of trust that you have formed them in their character enough that they're not going to be completely cruel.
We're talking about we're investing in these relationships a lot, not just one-offs, and that we're really giving them the foundations, the tools, the opportunities. We're not coming in and trying to correct them every second, but that we're seeing situations in their lives when they relate to each other when we're around that we address. And then we also have, we have check-ins. We're seeing how are the kids doing individually? How are we doing as a family?
Yeah.
And that gives us a sense that, okay, yeah, they are working together well. They are playing together well. Yes, they are on their own developing and nurturing their relationships and goodness, in each other. So that's a big
And
deal.
then part of that too is, like Mike was saying, is praying together. And it's a beautiful thing. At the end of the day, we try to pray with our kids. Well, Mike prays with all the little kids before they go to bed earlier.
Right.
And then usually around 9 o'clock when people are back from sports and play practices and whatever, that's when we would pray together as a family, just say evening prayer. And then that gives us enough time to, watch TV or just talk or whatever. But a lot of times it winds up being like kind of a recap of the day. which is really good. But
just to personally reconnect. Again, it's both spiritually putting our priorities where it is, and then also, again, we've done podcasts on this, but like thinking about our family retreat that we do together, to encourage even individual children to step up and lead certain parts, to give their kind of a testimony or a talk or what have you to their siblings. And so you're developing these relationships that have a spiritual foundation to them, that they're emotionally, socially and spiritually engaging each other. We've spent a lot of time about the prayer, but I just want to say that, so it's, it's not like the Benedictine rule of ora et labor, pray and work. It's play, it's prayer, it's work.
Though I'm sure Benedictines play too.
I'm hoping.
Okay, so another idea is to make them room together. Kids really, there is this modern idea that kids need their own rooms. They have to have, you need to buy a house and everybody has their own room. That's not true. I don't.
Actually, I think that's wrong. I do. I mean, again, now if you have one child, it's totally different. And then if you have kids who are grown up and your house is becoming empty, from children, that's one thing. But intentionally, I would choose to put our kids room together, regardless of the money, the space, and all of that.
Because they need to learn how to live with other people.
That's right.
I know my brother, Father Joe, who is a priest out in Denver, he says that it's a real transition for a lot of priests when they have other priests come and live with them, because maybe they've never had that. They've never shared a house, let alone shared a room. And for his experience, he always shared a room with people. He grew up like that. And so that gave him a certain set of skills that as adults, other priests, and other adults kind of had to learn. But he was just like, this is part of his life. So I think that it's really good for life skills, to have a room with the other kids, other siblings. But then also, that forms a certain bond with siblings when they room together.
I have very distinct memories of rooming with my brother Kevin.
Yeah.
And we're many years apart, but I just have little memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Just little games we might play before we go to bed, or stories he would tell me as my older brother, and those leave lasting impressions and deep sense of security. I mean, because it's your room. You might be at odds with the teachers at school, or even your parents or other siblings, but then you've kind of got the safety of your room, and your roommate ends up being part of that safety net, and part of that security. That this is a certain sense where this is their kingdom. I mean, not that you don't have access and reign over that room, but that there is something very powerful about that you're sharing this space with one or maybe two other roommates.
I know we have a daughter. We have several daughters who are more introverted, and I think it's been really good for them to share a room with the sister, because they can be there, and it's your sister, so you can just be alone. You don't feel like you have to talk, but you can talk, and they're there for you, and you can kind of like exercise that part of your personality, but still have that, alone time as well. And so I think it can be a really beautiful thing, because it gives you too a mirror to yourself. Because a lot of times I don't think people realize how they come off. But when you have a brother or sister who's going to be like, you know what, you're being a real jerk right now, or gets mad at you, that's a mirror.
That's right. That's helpful.
Exactly.
And you know what? Anyone can hold their breath for a couple days, maybe even a week. But if you're living together with somebody, you can't stand it after the first week or so. And so that forces conflict. Right. And guys, conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict actually is awesome. That leads to good, objective change and improvement and, whatever, growth and character and so forth. And when you have that mirror, you have one kid who might be a slob and one kid who's a neat freak, and they help each other out.
Right.
Through fighting and craziness and conflict, but it brings greater unity, it brings greater character development, and that's
and
huge.
Just again to give you hope, I will tell you, I have had conflicts with my daughters between each other, where I was literally sitting there and I have two teenage girls crying, and I have like a pad of paper and I'm like a counselor. I'm like, okay, we need to come up with an agreement about this room.
That's right. That's
okay,
right.
What can you agree with? Is that okay with you? Okay, I'm writing that down.
It was like a terrorist negotiation process.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes.
And it's like a terrorist negotiation / counseling session where it's like, okay, when she says this, how does this make you feel? Can you reflect back to her what she's saying?
Unbelievable.
That is the kind of stuff. And it's hard. It is hard. It's hard, but it's worth it. Would it be easier? We have an extra room. Would it be easier just to split them up and put them in different rooms? Yes. But you know what? it's better for them, and they are still rooming together, and they're fine,
and they survive.
and they
Actually, I
survived.
think, and again, I look at the relationship now. I think it's so much stronger
Yeah.
and so much more valuable for them.
Right.
And again, that's the whole point, is that we know this works. So
Right.
not only trust us, but it's just the wisdom of the ages that works. Putting people like that together, it really helps. And it isn't going to be easy, but it is worth it.
Right. And they are valuing, the differences between the two of them, and valuing the uniqueness, because, our daughter that is a slob is also extremely creative. Our daughter that is very neat is just not so creative. So
and they help each other.
I think that they can help each other, and that's really good for life. And just to realize that it's just not all going to be sunshine and roses. It's just not. And so that's what we're just trying to do, is just to give you hope and say, when I was growing up, all I remember is fighting with my brothers and sisters.
That's right.
I really honestly can say that. And some of them, my little brothers were just so cute, and I really got along with them very well. But my little sisters, I just found annoying, and my friends really liked them, and that annoyed me to no end, because I was always trying to run away from them. But now I'm just so blessed to have my sisters who are younger than me, and I hope that I'm a blessing to them.
Well, and I won't mention any names, but I'm just talking to some of your brothers and sisters. Hearing them talk about one of your different members of the family who were like, I can't believe they were so annoying growing up.
They were a jerk.
They were,
Those
blah,
were the
blah,
exact
blah,
words.
all these different things. But now they're like super close.
Yeah.
And again, not only just to give you hope, but just that
People change.
People change. But I remember they were talking about how one of your siblings really brought this person to a conversion, brought them to a deeper place with Christ.
Yeah.
And it was because they were in a family that they were forced to be close to each other, that they were in an environment where that was normal and natural. And the person who was a jerk really came to realize, you know what? Oh my gosh, I need to encounter Christ in a way that I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Brought to a deeper sense that, and it wasn't by the parents, it was because of the child,
Right.
because of the sibling.
Right.
And that sibling was then their life was changed. And everyone's like, this is possibly one of the best siblings now that we all love. But that wasn't the case early on. And so, but a sibling did that. So
Right.
when you're doing this, recognize that there was so much fruit. One, it's worth it because it's going to, but you're putting them in proximity with people who can speak truth to their hearts in a way that you may never be able to.
I know Father Joe has said this. My brother, Father Joe, has said that there were times in his life when he was kept from doing sinful things because he honestly, the only thing that he thought was, how am I going to tell this to Paul, who is his older brother, who's about 5 years older than him? He was like, I couldn't think how.
I couldn't look him in the eye.
I wouldn't be able to look Paul in the eye. And this was not, even though Father Joe has a great relationship with my dad, it wasn't my dad. It was his older brother.
Amen.
Who was keeping him. He was like, I wouldn't be able to tell him. And he knew he would have to.
That's why this is so important.
That's right. That's why this is so important.
And, and we have to teach, I remember sitting down and talking to some of our older kids about the ways that they relate to their younger kids.
Yeah.
And just be intentional with them and just say, look, you have no idea how important your relationship is with these younger guys are. And I saw them and they just instantly got it. And they have had such an impact in the lives of their younger brothers and sisters, being intentional and thoughtful, making time, particularly as they're away at college, coming home and spending time with them. And some it comes very naturally, and some you just have to prod them a little bit.
Right.
But they jump right in. They're like, yeah, I can see that. And they feel it. And then they're realizing, wow. Because again, you're setting them up for life. Wow, when I give back, my heart is full. My life is full when I'm giving myself away. And to see your kids, when you see your siblings, or when you see them as siblings relating to each other in that way, there is no greater gift.
And my dad would say that all the time. He would just sit back and watch us relate to each other and just like cry, because he's like, this is what I've always wanted, just to see my brothers and, see my children loving each other and supporting each other.
That's true beauty right there.
It really is. And I think that we have to remember, as your kids are growing up, even though there's going to be conflict, for you as a parent to realize that words matter. Like,
Yes.
and we've talked about this again in another podcast, but just as one of the tools, like to not allow hateful or demeaning speech between your children. Even though it's good, sometimes it happens, you need to step in and say, this is wrong. You need to point that out to them. Even if they do it again, you need to continually point that out to realize that those words matter, and words matter. Good words also matter. So just as they can hurt each other, they can also ask for forgiveness. They can also have time when they're upbuilding each other, when they're honoring each other. Those are some of the things that we've done. I know my parents did, is have time where during someone's birthday, where everyone goes around and honors that person.
That's right.
Say, I love you, Katie, I love you because blah, 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 blah. And then kind of we taught them, you have to say something specific that they do. You can't just say because you're nice. Say something specifically that they do for you. And we've taught that to our kids throughout the years. And sometimes they don't want to do it. We make them do it anyway because it's important, those words, those encouraging words. Because how many times you see on like movies or you hear of people who say, I was never able to tell my dad, my brother, my sister, I was never able to tell them how much they mean to me. What a tragedy. That is a tragedy, and I never want that to happen to my children.
Right. So we just create those experiences, at least on their birthdays, if not other times, where they're intentionally honoring to their siblings.
Right.
And that we are honoring them as well. But to hear it from a brother or sister, to hear it from a peer, it means a world. And also, too, if you think about, like, from a marketing standpoint, they say that you need to have a message 7 times for a message to stick. Yeah. Think of that, my friends. How many times do they have? And then every negative word, I think, retracts all those 7.
Right.
So it's like, your cruelty, your words, the bad words, tear down as a parent or as a sibling. So make sure you're at least intentional about making sure there are honoring and good words, and that the message that they're receiving is they are loved, they are unique, they are wonderfully and fearfully made.
And the other thing you have to fight against is indifference, because I think sometimes indifference is almost worse, like ignoring.
Well, that's the opposite of love.
Right, exactly.
Opposite of love isn't like hate; it's really indifference.
Right, and so that's what we're talking about, giving them the opportunity to do things together, because you don't want a child to ever feel ignored by their brothers or sisters. And so sometimes I will say to the older kids, hey, Abby's trying to get your attention. Hey, Claire's trying to talk to you. Because, they're teenagers. They're self-centered, as we all were, and that's just the reality of the situation. And they need to open their eyes. And then usually they're like, oh, yeah, what, or whatever.
But we didn't realize.
Exactly. And so that's like part of the, like, making them do chores together, making them play together, blah, 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 is not tolerating indifference and not tolerating cruelty and correcting that. And, relationships change over time, because the time that they have in your house, it's an important time. But the reality is that in the span of their lives, it is a short time. And that's what I meant before when I was saying, like, I only lived with some of my siblings for 5 years, for 8 years. But now I have the rest of my life to spend with them. And you want to create, even after they leave your home, create times when you're together, whether it's holidays or family vacations or whatever, investing in that, as your kids get older, and for even you with your brothers and sisters to do that, because it's important to make family a priority and to keep your kids together.
Yeah, and it's really, that's our job. Our job is to do that, but recognizing that we can't do this on our own. I think that's what we're trying to say, is that you aren't meant to parent on your own. You need to enlist the help in the formation of your children. That is, you need to take your understanding that how do we, kind of going back to the very beginning of this podcast, how do we form our children? First and foremost, we have our marriage together, right? And so we're modeling and showing and witnessing what true love really is for them. And then it's how we relate to the kids. But that's not sufficient. If you want to form your child for greatness that God has called them to, then you need to instill that relationships with each other, because ultimately their siblings are going to be helping form them almost as powerfully as you do as a parent. And so you have to be intentional about that and recognize your job isn't done just by the way that you communicate or way that you relate. It's the environment and the intentionality you bring to how they relate to each other. That will set them up for success in this life. And by this life, I mean, for all eternity. And that's crucial. So that's our goal here. And so remember, here are the couple things, again, just as a reminder, make them work together, make them play together, make them pray together, make them room together, and allow them to appreciate the differences and the uniqueness of each of the siblings.
Sounds good.
So Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and that you this sparks a conversation for you and your spouse. We have been really blessed by the encouragement and the comments we receive from people. And I want to invite you right now to just take 5 seconds, 10 seconds to go to iTunes and rate the podcast, because the more that the ratings come up, the more people are able to receive this podcast. It comes up in the ratings and it gets it spread around.
Yeah, if you like this podcast, please help us spread the news.
Yeah, so if you can post it to Facebook and share it, we're obviously not making any money off of this. We're doing this because, one, I just want to spend time with my wife and looking at her beautiful face. But the hope is that it's sharing a little bit of the encouragement we've received from so many others in our parenting, and that you might be able to pass this on, because I really believe our world is in great need of families that are flourishing and alive.
That's what's going to change the world.
And that is so, so important. And so you as a spouse, to renew the well of your marriage, to renew the way that you are forming and educating your children, and as we talked about in this podcast, renewing the way that your kids relate to one another. So again, on iTunes, on Facebook, if you can share, post, and send the word around, and let us know if you have ideas, suggestions on topics that you'd like to hear about. We love getting to those questions and comments. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.